Welcome to Marketing Demystified, the podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips to transform your marketing game? You're in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jenn Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. Sure, everyone can create content, and many do. It's becoming easier and easier to create content, but truly aligning content with the right stages of the customer journey is really a bit of an art and a science. I'm really excited to dive into this topic today. You know, I'm a big proponent of customer journey mapping and focusing on personalization and making sure your content is really relevant. So to dive into the topic and learn how to get started, I'm excited to be joined by Sara Giddens, Director of Growth Marketing and Strategy at Kahua, a capital program and construction project management software, and an expert on the topic. Welcome to the show, Sara.
Thanks so much for having me today.
Really excited to talk about this. I want to focus most of our conversation today on content itself, but just even before we get into that, the concept of having a customer journey laid out and mapped out is so important, and a step that a lot of companies skip over. And so everybody who's listening in, let's assume you've done a really good job of mapping out your customer journey. And maybe along the way, we'll share some tips around that as well. But really excited to talk about sort of customizing and personalizing the content based on the work that's been done around customer journey mapping.
Absolutely.
So let's start with maybe the negative and sort of where people are getting tripped up on stuff like this. Why is creating the right content for the right journey stage so hard?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. One of the things that I've experienced, I'm sure every other marketer has experienced as well, is that the content is exciting, right? Everyone loves content. We love to make it. We love to consume it. It's really easy to get caught in the trap of just creating content because it's fun, because it's cool, because you had this great idea and you just want to try it out. And that is wonderful. And we love content in all forms. However, I think sometimes where we forget, or maybe we miss the mark a little bit, is thinking about how you are actually going to place that content and where you're going to use it. So I think starting with the use in mind sometime is a little more helpful and kind of puts you on the right path rather than just creating lots of content and then figuring out how you're going to use it.
That's interesting. Yeah, it is easy to kind of get distracted by the shiny idea, right? Like, oh my gosh, here's a great concept. I used to have that a lot. I guess it depends on maybe the personalities of your coworkers and your leadership team, but there's always people with these sort of like great ideas, like, oh, can't you see the billboard, right?
Yeah.
And that, like, how do you flip that? How do you think about, where do you start to kind of figure out where that use is that you want to build content for?
Right. Yeah. So I think one thing that I've done before is sit down with my team and just take a look at our customer journey, start to finish, and look at the content that we have available today and identify where those gaps are, and then really make an effort to focus on filling those gaps. You can still use those great, fun, creative ideas, but then you're using them in a more purposeful way.
Yeah, for sure. Are there sort of different types of content that are better suited? I mean, I guess even like as you're looking at that map and trying to figure out the gaps, how do you know what content is for which stages? Is it sort of a specific formula of like the type of content you're going to see?
Yeah, I think it varies definitely business by business and your own customer journey and how people engage with you. For me, being in the B2B high tech space, it often looks like kind of that classic awareness, consideration, decision flow, right? So first of all, when people don't know who your company is or they don't know anything about you, they're going to look you up, right? So you start there with your content. You think about things like your ad placement, what messaging you're putting out in your ads at that very top level. You also want to think about your website. They're probably going to check out your website. So when you're creating that content, you think about how then do I drive them to the next step? So if they're visiting my website because they don't know who I am, then what do I want to get them to do on the website, and kind of driving that. So I think very early on in the funnel, it's educational. It's saying this is who we are. This is, what we stand for, the benefits that we bring, that type of messaging. And as you work your way down that funnel, then you get really into more like where the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. So you're getting into more of your case studies, if you have that, or your peer review sites, you're directing them there so they can see that their peers are saying your product is awesome, that type of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really interesting just the language you use of like trying to get them to take the next step, not the last step.
Exactly.
Because I think that's like so common that you are putting out very maybe high level, top of funnel, early awareness type content and asking people to purchase in the same breath, right? So that combination of the right call to action to move to the next step as opposed to moving to the last step is really important too, not just what content you're presenting them with.
Right. So oftentimes, where we push people in the world that I live in is to request a demo, right? We want them to sit down with the product, see how it works, and see how it can benefit them specifically for whatever they need. So we don't start with request a demo right off the bat. If someone's just doing a quick Google search to figure out who we are, if we're even the right solution for them, we don't want to immediately push them to that. We want to educate them a little bit. And I think sometimes that's an easy part to miss.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I see too a lot is a sort of overcomplicated message or maybe not even overcomplicated, but like too much information at the top of the funnel. Like if I think about what you described, awareness, consideration, decision, I probably don't need to know all the details about features and functionality and, those specific kind of things until I'm sort of near the end. Like I've already made the decision that this seems like something that's going to solve whatever problem I'm setting out to solve. So I find that like giving too much complexity at the early stage is also a deterrent as well when people are not ready to consume that type of information. So what you're saying, like that education piece is really important at the beginning as opposed to at the end. But actually, I think that might be maybe an evolution of content over the last several years. Like it hasn't really always been that way, has it?
No, I don't think so. I think you're right about that.
Yeah. It's kind of new that like it used to be sort of very product and functionality focused maybe in some areas in B2B, especially and in SaaS. But there is this kind of new buying behavior of wanting to do your own research and wanting to educate yourself about all of the options and different competitive sets or different ways to solve a problem before actually making that decision.
Right, definitely. I mean, we have so many tools at our disposal now, which is great. It's fantastic. And as marketers, we should love that and use them and leverage them. But you're right. It's really easy to get overloaded with information. I like to think about it in the way that I'm a consumer, right? Like I may not be buying construction software today, but I am still a consumer at the end of the day. So when I'm creating processes or campaigns or messaging, I think about how I would want to consume that information. And if I can't read through it and think, okay, this is the pain I'm having, this is clearly the solution that they provide, then I don't think it's the right piece of content, no matter what you're creating.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good way to gut check and to kind of maybe sense check it with others in the organization as well with that same lens. It's a great tip. I guess along those same lines, how do you kind of test whether or not the content at a particular stage is working?
So we measure engagement in a lot of different ways. We A/B test all the time. That's something that we love to do. But I think ultimately it goes back to just getting to the next step, right? We want to continue learning about how much time they spend on page, where they come from, and that type of stuff. But ultimately, we just want to get them to the next step. And if you think about it in terms of that funnel flow, if you just keep encouraging people to take the next step, then that will show you if your marketing material is working or not, depending on if they take the next step.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so actually like maybe going back to what we said at the beginning about mapping the customer journey, I know one thing that's really important that I always recommend is having a customer centric KPI associated with each stage. Because that's exactly the thing that you're going to want to be measuring, if that touch point is actually doing its job. It also could be a great way to identify those gaps that you mentioned of like this particular spot in the journey, this stage of the funnel is where things are breaking and people are getting stuck here. So that's an area that maybe needs some new type of content or new approach to it.
Yeah, exactly. So when we look at our campaigns, we look at things like, the open rates, the click rates, all of that type of stuff, engagement as a whole. And then ultimately, we're still mapping to whatever that goal is for MQLs over to sales or for revenue as it comes from something that is marketing sourced. So it is those baby steps in terms of metrics, but ultimately the end goal that we all have in mind is MQLs create opportunities that create revenue. And that's what we need to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your position on, the different channels that you use to actually get this content in front of people at different journey stages? Is there a sort of formula or is it really custom to your business?
I think it's really custom ultimately. So I've been in the construction software tech for over 10 years now, not to date myself. So I've seen this show a few times. And I think that even though the industry is relatively same as a whole, I think the placement of the content is really unique to each organization. And I think that has a lot to do with your own consumer base and where they are online or in person now. So it could be, LinkedIn is kind of a tried and true. It's great. It could be Google, and then you could be, doing specific like conferences or trade shows. And you want to have a unique message for each one of those places because your interaction in that setting is going to be different every time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, like some of the ways to kind of, this is all maybe part of the mapping process is figuring out actually what are people, doing, thinking, and feeling at those different stages of the journey. And that really helps to plan out the channels and the touch points. Because if people are not going to conferences to learn about new pieces of technology, then that's not a good place for your specific business. So
Yeah.
that audience research is so critical. And some of it is just traditional research that needs to be done. There's also some great tools out there to figure out like what content people consume online, what social media networks do they use based on their profiles, who do they follow, what podcasts do they listen to. It's super important to try to figure that stuff out. And it's so funny to me actually that I feel like these steps get skipped quite often. It's just kind of a blanket. Here's our message. Let's put it out to everybody and anybody everywhere and
Right.
see if it works. When actually like this little bit of research and mapping out can really help you be more efficient when deciding those channels and really help you to not waste marketing spend.
Yeah, 100%. Something that I worked on with my team recently and we're still doing is kind of always looking to shift that mindset of thinking about what our customers are doing, what our prospects are doing, where they are, and really driving deeper into the creation of a strategy as a whole rather than just thinking campaign after campaign or ad after ad. You need campaigns and you need ads, and that is great and fantastic stuff, and they should work. But ultimately, if you don't have a whole strategy that kind of encapsulates all of that, then you don't really have much.
Mm. Yeah, that it makes total sense, and it's so critical to kind of center your not just your marketing strategy, but your business strategy
Mhm.
around those different journey stages and kind of moving people across. And I guess to that point, like how do you make sure that this doesn't just live within marketing and it's just something that's marketing's look like? How do you help create alignment across other teams that also need to be thinking about different stages of the customer journey?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up actually, because I think that that is incredibly important. And just like with anything, you can't execute on something unless you have that support and that buy-in from many different teams and your organization leadership as a whole. So what we like to do is coordinate and collaborate with as many people as possible, our subject matter experts on the in the industry and on the topic. We want to get their buy-in. We have ideas about what we should be doing and saying, but ultimately we want to fact check that, right, with others who are also involved in the process. So we kind of circulate that information, collaborate on those plans all together, and then at Kahua, we have a great mentality of supporting marketing, which is fantastic. So it's really easy to kind of get that buy-in and support. Now, we certainly want to be redirected if we're, going off the rails with something, but ultimately, when we work on it together, it always works out well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you just can't every strategy is going to perform better when there's alignment across teams, regardless of who initiates it or where it ultimately is owned and where it lives. But it's just so important to make sure everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction.
Mhm.
One thing that I've done in a previous role was to actually create committees, cross-functional committees that were aligned to different journey stages. So it was like the entire business had, like, when we were thinking about the awareness stage, for example, you had representation from marketing, sales, customer, product, even finance and other executive functions to all be thinking about the awareness stage of the funnel. It's like such a great way to get the whole company thinking about the customer first and
Mhm.
not about our own metrics and our own OKRs as a team or whatever, but really cross-functionally and customer centric all at once. Like there's so much more benefit to properly doing the customer journey map and creating this personalized content beyond just the marketing benefits. I guess like there's a whole strategic growth benefit to doing this properly.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I imagine that the model that you just talked about of kind of that cross departmental collaboration for each awareness phase, I imagine that that worked out really well for you.
It really did. It just got, it centered the conversation around like how to create customer value and customer satisfaction, whether or not they were a customer, really, and help to kind of create some shared metrics and ownership
Mhm.
across how we were driving people to that next step, as you described. Because sometimes people are a marketing channel. The
Sure.
salesperson is having a conversation with people at a conference or on the street, or the customer success person is talking to clients. And so, thinking about your colleagues as communication channels, it's a great way to kind of align that.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Now, what do you think about? I mean, everybody is talking about AI. We talk about AI quite a bit on the show here. What's the role of AI when specifically as we're thinking about content for journey stages?
I think it can be really interesting. Obviously, ChatGPT is kind of the forefront of AI as everybody knows it right now. So, one, I think that can be a really interesting tool to leverage. I caution against using something like a ChatGPT to write your content because I think then it gets a little obvious in what you're creating. But I certainly love the idea of using AI to kind of prompt some ideas, get people talking, bring topics up, and then maybe help shape the direction of it. But at the end of the day, I think that all of the content you're creating should still have that personal touch. So we use AI, but it's certainly not the only method that we rely on. I also think that AI has a place within the customer journey and data. Marketing is kind of in this unique position of having used some level of AI or machine learning for a while now. Just like, with tools like Demandbase, for example, having things like a pipeline predict score, or maybe being able to tell like who might become an opportunity, what other contacts you should be talking to at an organization, things like that. So I think AI definitely does have its place, and it's certainly something that's not going away. So if people aren't using AI to any degree yet, I would encourage them to. There's a lot of ways out there that it can be leveraged, and I've found it to be really helpful.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea to sort of use it as a research tool, not for primary research, but to figure out what data exists and kind of help to prioritize and take a look at maybe segmentation and things like that. And I totally agreed. Like, please do not let AI write your content for you.
No.
There's so many tools and they all claim to be able to, write in your voice and do all types of stuff, but there is nothing better than human generated original content. So please don't let AI write your content for you. But, along those lines of like sort of that research and segmentation, like how do you think about different personas or different customer profiles within your business? Like, are you looking at different journey maps and different experiences across those different segments? Or do you try to, maybe in your business, it's fairly simple and kind of everybody runs through a single flow, but how do you think about maybe different stages that might exist across different target buyers?
Construction is really interesting. I think oftentimes when people think of the construction industry, they think of, the process you might go through to build a house, right? That is probably most relatable to all of us. And that's not necessarily the only use case for construction. I mean, if we look around the world that we live in, everything has a construction element. The roads that you drive on, bridges, schools, hospitals, all of that is construction, has to be built. It has to be organized and planned. Even within those different verticals, like we call them, like the healthcare vertical or education vertical, even within those different verticals, you have different players within that, right? So you have, someone who owns the project, you have someone who manages the project, you might have subcontractors who, work on one little specific part, or specialty contractors, like your tile person. So there's a lot of different layers actually in the construction industry. I, as a marketer, find that really interesting. But what you actually get with that is a lot of different behaviors and a lot of different personas. So being able to understand not only within each vertical, but within each persona, how someone behaves, is really informative and really insightful to what you need to be doing or creating to get them to engage better. I also think that that's where the machine learning and AI kind of have its place in helping us understand the data a little bit better. It would take us forever if we manually went through all of the behaviors of all of those people within all of those verticals. I don't know if any one person could wrap their head around it. So really relying on your tools to help support that and help guide your decision making, I think is critical.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It can get complex. But like you said, like you can't map out every behavior of every persona for every segment.
Right.
Like there is some element of keeping it simple enough that you'll actually use it, but being personalized enough that you remain relevant. I think that's really important, but it can be a tough balance to strike.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough. I think this is such an important conversation and so important for companies and marketers to be thinking about how are you making sure you're putting a relevant message in front of people at the right time? So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for listening in. I'm going to be back with another episode next week when I talk with Cheryl Rodnick